It's November the 17th. The election for mayor of the city of Hartford is over. Pedro Segarra is the mayor elected to a full term at the will of the voters. As you know, I ran for mayor in the city of Hartford, and obviously I did not win. What we have had was a unique campaign. We call it an untraditional or a non-traditional campaign. And so today what we're going to do is give you a little bit of, back room, if you will, or provide for you some transparency into our process and how things happen. So to that extent, we have not had a conversation about the election and the results thereof. I mean, I've talked to several people here and there, but I haven't talked to some of the people who I have leaned on for their guidance and their input and critical review of some of the things that we were doing. And since we were running on a campaign of transparency and openness, to the degree that we were going to have a nationally syndicated television show called The Hall, which would give cameras open access to what we were doing. Our first episode of The Hall would have been the transition. Well, we didn't win, so our first episode and only episode of The Hall, if you will be the post-election analysis of our campaign. So you're seeing it as it's going to happen. We have purposely not had this conversation so that we could share it with all of you out there, particularly the 641 of you that came out and cast your vote. And I guess with that, I'll let you see who's here in the room with me. We've got George Mack. I want to welcome you, and thanks for coming. We've got George Milner. It's good to see you, George. Welcome. George was in a horrible car accident, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on. We've got James Gamble. James, thanks for coming. And of course, we have Earl Shepard. And with that, we're going to get underway. There was one other person who was going to be here tonight. She's not made it, but if she comes, we'll take a short break and have her take a seat, and we'll get on with the discussion. All right. So, what went wrong?
Well, I would say what I said to you initially, and that is that it would be very helpful for you to summarize what kind of strategy you put in place and whether or not you think the parts of those strategies worked. To comment without some parameter what you were attempting to do, I'm not sure how helpful that will be. And so the idea is to see if you had a plan and you were able to execute it. I know that off camera, we talked about the lack of resources, which of course is a major factor in any campaign, whether we like it or not. I know that Jim would come by the house on a few occasions, and I would comment on it because the way our voters respond, sadly, is that in the last 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks of the campaign, people tend to get more serious about voting if they vote. So those last 2 weeks, the traditional machine is geared up with its money to hit every potential voter with all kinds of pamphlets and so on, because the memory of many of our voters is such a short thing that they don't do the kind of in-depth research that we all should do in terms of any candidate. And so what I saw in my house, for example, was stats of stuff from everyone except you. And obviously, that's the result of not having the resources, I would assume.
All right. Well, then let's, as I mentioned when we first started, in my little introduction, was that this was a little bit of a non-traditional campaign. There is a strategy behind political campaigns, and those strategies are proven and have served well to the degree that every time there's an election, it's done the same way. and generally yields a win for somebody. But what we wanted to do was to engage voters by educating them. So our campaign was a 4-year-long strategy using the grassroots media, whether it was the public access, the local newspapers, and an awful lot of door knocking. We knocked on doors, we had conversations, we had radio programs. Our whole intent was to create within the mind of the voter a relationship with me, the candidate, somebody that they knew and somebody that they trusted, and therefore could deliver to them how shall we say, would make good on promises. In my assessment, Hartford needed jobs. So what I did is I went out and found somebody who would bring jobs here. Now, with most politicians making promises, I'm just another knucklehead in the line of making promises, and most seem empty. So I thought it would be important to build a trust factor so that when I'm talking about these jobs, people would say, well, he's done this, he's done that. The chances of him delivering are high. But we did not have any money, and we knew that going in. So what we decided we would do would be focus on education. And that was our premise, to educate the voter, to educate every time we had an opportunity to be in front of the camera, whether it was at a debate, whether it was at a forum, whether it was on WKND, whether it was on public access, is to educate the voter. And I know our message got out. I know people heard, but, maybe the right people didn't hear. Maybe there wasn't a call to action. I believe that people knew. I believe that people heard, but that's me,
Well, and that's my question. I'm sorry, George. Of course, Jim had come by the house. He comes by, periodically and so on. Now, of course, I was aware of this early attempt to educate, etc. My question, very early in the process, was, well, how did you know that's working? Mm-hmm. I asked that question, I don't know how many times. I said, well, it doesn't matter what you say. It's what people hear, and so I got into conversations in terms of, primarily, Jim, in terms of the women of color, because as I understood it, they were your on-the-ground people.
Right. And
so my question is, I say, well, no, who's going behind you and asking, I understand that you talked to Mr. McCauley, what do you think? I never got any response to any of that kind of question.
Right. I think that if we had gotten money, and we made an attempt a few times to get money, with that money we could have better educated the public. We could have accomplished our objective more. If we would have had that money, we could have used different mediums. We could have done mailings, blah blah blah, phones, whatever. But I think that with the momentum that we thought we had, and that we thought we were gauging from people, when we go talk to people, like Stan was talking to people from the TV show, the radio show, and some of the responses that we were getting, we felt that we were reaching people without money, and if you can do that, great. That's great. I mean, that's if you can reach people without having to spend all the money that all the politicians spend, and achieve your objective, then that's a good thing. That's great. People are listening, and you are truly educating people. I think, and I want to say this while we're talking, because I don't think you lost or we lost. I think the city of Hartford lost. That's what I think. Now, I don't know. That's just my own personal opinion. The turnout troubled me. The numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, just the 15%, and particularly the people that came from the north end of Hartford, which was the lowest, of course. And I don't know if we could have done anything about that, to be honest with you.
About the turnout.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't. It may be the times, the particular times we're in. I mean, we had a major storm just before the thing. People were going through all kinds of stuff. Lights was out and all that. I don't know. It could have been a combination of all that. But I think that, and I know that you certainly made every attempt to reach people and spent more time. You had me worried because I know you wasn't getting no sleep, no rest. You was up all night. You were on the computer all night, running all day, And in terms of the job thing you spoke of, you delivered that. We had Doc here. Doc came here and went on radio and said that he would come and bring jobs here to the city. Mm-hmm. So we made people aware of that. Again, I don't know if the right people heard it or as many people as we wanted to hear it heard it, but it was certainly something that we would have done.
Well, almost certainly.
I'd like to kind of chime in at this point because it's not, in my opinion, it's not a question of whether people heard us or not. Many people in Hartford, in fact, most of the people in Hartford heard us. If they didn't hear us, they heard of us. Mm-hmm. And so, if money was the factor that was needed to get the vote out, how were you going to spend the money? Because there weren't anybody that had money that ran any better campaign than we did. There was no one who had a better informed website. There was no one who went on any more radio shows than we did, Stan did. There was no one who did more television than Stan did, and how he explained and educated at each forum that we went to. And he attended every forum. He done everything that a political person, in my opinion, who's serious about the people that he's working for, he did it. He moved to Enfield Street. He told people way before he moved, I'm moving there for you. Now, I've never heard a politician say or do that since I've been in Hartford. But this man did it. And not only did he move here, he brought his family. He put himself out on a limb financially. But beyond the money to me is not the issue, because like I said in the beginning, I saw people that had a lot of money. They raised over $200,000 and everybody was raving over all of that. But they weren't saying anything to the people. They weren't speaking to the issues that real people in this city feel and want spoken to. I didn't see that happen from anyone other than Stan. Now, if all people want to do is relate to somebody because they got a little money, that's one thing. But this man had a plan. We had worked that plan for some 4 years or more. But what happened is, I think people were confused about how long we had really been campaigning and working for them. Because my efforts in this whole campaign was for the people of Hartford. It was for you. I didn't need a job. I didn't need to have any presence at City Hall or wherever. but I did know that there needed to be change. That's what drove me. Not only did it drive me to use my energy, it drove me to use what finances I had. It drove me to everywhere I went, I was passing out business cards. Now, I understand that a lot of people did a mailing at the end of the campaign. But prior to these mailings, how many cards did we actually put in people's hand? We didn't send them to their mailbox. We didn't lay them on their windshield of their car. Every card we passed out went into someone's hand.
Right, we hand out over 20,000.
20,000 cards was passed out in Hartford to people who could go on Stan's website. They could even get on the phone and call him up and get him personally with any question that they had in terms of doubts about the campaign or who he was, what he stood for. And so this was the thing that kept me motivated and kept me working for that 4 years with Stan. I didn't think that the turnout that we ultimately ended up with, I still don't understand what that means. And that's, I think, what we're trying to figure out tonight, because even if you look at the people that had money, they got a low turnout.
The turnout was the turnout in the general election was worse than the turnout in the primary election.
Right.
In terms of percentage wise.
Right. Well, let me kind of respond. Well, first of all, to what George said. I think George is correct in this sense that the city probably lost. One of the reasons I believe, that the city lost is because we've had a Democratic chokehold on the system for decades, and conditions have gotten worse. So I sort of concur, with that. But I think it's important for us to go back to the original statement or question I was raising, and that is, how did you determine whether or not people heard you? See, it has nothing to do with what you're saying,
right,
or what you're passing out. That's like the teacher who keeps saying, I've been teaching, so all the kids are failing.
Right.
So that's not really the issue.
Right.
What we're looking at is when you enact a process, be it cards, door to door, or whatever, you got to find out whether that's working. The way you generally do that, and why it's important, is this. You might be using a process that might be tweaked in a minor way, that all of a sudden turn that whole process around and people hear you. So without the feedback, you can't tell whether or not your process is, is going well. You're just running a process.
Right.
We see that every day with people running. Well, that's not working, but they're running it. So you got to have the feedback to determine whether or not it's effective.
Right.
And you can do that if you have empowered the resources. It could be money or a human. Somebody has to go behind you, and say, okay, he hit 200 or 300 people over here. Let's see what those people really got out of that. That tells you more than this stuff, in terms of what's going on now. Certain kinds of things we already know about Hartford in terms of the lack of participation and so on. I believe, because I've been here a while and I've run and developed numerous programs and so on, that we've had a failure of leadership for so long that it's really entrenched in people's minds. Or they're only talking about a job in politics, etc. So whatever you're doing, you have to do something to counter that so that people understand that this is not business as usual. This is why the feedback is so critical. In fact, you need more feedback if you're running a somewhat alternative program as opposed to the traditional. Because if it's alternative, people don't understand. That's what it means. It's an alternative approach. They're not familiar with it. They don't know what to do with it. And so you have to determine whether or not your message is getting through. That clearly should have happened very early. That was one of the roles I thought, without hearing anyone tell me that the people of color who were the underground people would be touching bases with some of, the people that you visited, just to find out what people had heard, what they had learned, how they felt about it or whatever. The key here is that it's not what you say. And
It's
you gotta,
what they hear.
It's what they hear. See, and it's critical because we've seen it here. There's efforts to put out, that's not working. You gotta make sure it's working first. So hence, this is why you go to your plan and you say, okay, we attempted to do this. Okay, for whatever reason, this piece did not work, or we did not get the people in the way we thought we were. The educational process is not about you talking, it's about people hearing and learning. See, and if that doesn't occur, then all your efforts is for naught, or either only those people who are aware already pick up the message and then they run with it.
Okay, and what you're saying obviously makes sense, in a lot of sense. And there is, notably and understandably, a major flaw in our plan and thus the execution. Because for me, the test was election day. Of course, that's too late to make any kind of alterations.
Right.
Because if the plan works, we're going to get a big turnout. And why, obviously, there is so much effort and so much money spent in an election, because you can't wait to election day to see whether or not this is working. You need to make sure it's working before election day comes. So, and being on the cutting edge or with an alternative, or the more radical the plan, therefore the more need to do analysis as you go through. All right.
Yeah, it's true. It's very true. That's something that I wish in hindsight we had saw and implemented had we the resources to do it. What it came down to, in my opinion, is that there was basically 4 or 5 of us who were basically working every day on the whole thing. And I mean, we had a lot of people who said, "Yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
I'm with you." Voices.
That was one of James's concerns. His big concern.
That never delivered a cane. They said it,
right,
but when it came down to doing it, they never did it.
Well,
I mean, to the degree that I had a guy come up to me unsolicited on primary day and tell me he cast a vote for me. I got you. That's what you mean. He says, I got you. Yeah, I voted for you.
Yeah.
So, well, my name wasn't on the ballot. How could you to vote for me? And so this is the kind of thing that James was talking about. People will say they got you, but
don't mean nothing.
that doesn't mean anything.
Right. Well, it doesn't mean anything in terms of what they are saying, in terms of their ability or willingness to exert themselves. But it is an indicator. See, it's an indicator that even though you're talking to that person, nothing is happening on their end. So you're talking about how do you get results. Now, if you talk to half a dozen people, 50 people, whatever, and they say, man, we with you, we got you. And then all of a sudden you say, okay, we're meeting at so-and-so, can you be there? And none of them show up. That's a failed strategy. That don't work. So again, that kind of looking back and, well, how do I know, is crucial. Well, it's crucial in anything, but it's certainly crucial in a political campaign. This thing of money, I believe, because I think I said it early in the process, that there's a minimum amount of money you gotta have. I said I didn't know what that minimum was because I'm not a political kind of person. I know when we met at your house, I said you need someone with that kind of political experience, acumen, because that person would save you so much in terms of effort and so on, because the person has been through it, a number of times before. That person could probably tell you, well, running this kind of campaign in Hartford, you got X number of people, you really are not going to be able to survive very well without this bare minimum. Now, it'd be helpful if you had this much, but without this, you're almost a no-go. Because there are certain kinds of things you gotta do. I mean, there's certain kind of things that you just gotta do. Whether it's signage or mailings or whatever, there are certain kinds of things that have proven accurate over the century. And so that kind of person could have told you, well, look, okay, if you can't generate this kind of money, you really are going to be swimming upstream.
Well, the individuals of that caliber that you talk about predicted that we would get toasted. So their view was, you need money. And there is it was around 70,000 bare minimum. But you're not going to win. See, all the political strategists said that we can't win. You're not going to win. That is our assessment. That was the final analysis of the quote unquote politicos. But our view was, the people need to know that there's somebody who's going to run this race, give it all that they have. And we thought that the only way around that is to educate people and motivate them to come out. I think our biggest failure, if there is one, would be that we didn't have the analysis or the analytical tools to determine, is the message taking hold?
Right.
Well, you responded to a different question from the one that I put out. And that is that I'm talking about to run a successful campaign minimally. You're responding to, whether or not you're going to win. We know the entrenched people feeling is that you got a certain block, Democratic Party, whatever, and you can't win. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying that in order to do what you need to do, get your message out, there's a minimum amount. And if you get an astute person, the person can tell you. And then they could go right through it and say, well, you need at least 2 mail-ins. Well, I don't know what that number is, but that's an example. That person could tell you that. And that person would know pretty surely that without that kind of minimum or ground floor approach, you're just not going to be able to get to enough people. You're just not.
I'm kind of like in between both places here, because I've heard a lot about the need to take money out of politics. And this is all the way from Washington back to Hartford, Connecticut. Take the money out of politics and put the power back in the people's hand. But this was somewhat our approach. We wanted to empower the people of Hartford, not try to buy them, not try to buy their support, but we wanted to empower them. We wanted them, and Stan said it on a number of occasions, the most important currency one has is his vote. Money doesn't resonate when it comes to how you use your vote. The problem that I look at in this city, and I'm still looking for the answer for it, and anyone out there that has the answer for it, please bring it to me. or get it to me somehow. Because we have, I think, about, 40,000 registered voters in the city?
More than that.
Yes, more than that, a little bit more than
Yeah, we have at least 40,000 registered voters in the city of Hartford. And so we're sitting here tonight talking about a traditional campaign, how you run it, and how much money it takes. But the people that went the traditional route spent a lot of money, came away with the lowest voter turnout in history of the city. So what we were trying to offer people is an alternative. I stick by that. I think that the traditional way is why the city of Hartford is in the condition it's in right now. Stan spoke to the need to bring economic development to this city, but he didn't just speak to it. He had a CEO that spoke to the people of Hartford and said that he would come here if Stan got elected. He wasn't just talking like a lot of the other talking heads. And see, I don't know how much money it takes
To do what we did.
to do what we did. We did it better than the people with the money. But obviously,
we did a lot with
obviously,
not having money.
my concern right now is why is it that some 30,000 registered voters in the city of Hartford, they register every year because that card comes through the mail, and if you don't sign your name on that card and mail it back in, they take you off the voting list. If you are seriously a voter, why don't you vote? This is the question. I understand we did not win.
Right, so
It's
then why,
reflected in the numbers. I mean,
what is it about, well, there's a couple of ways, if you consider, strictly if you go with the voting your interest. Now, I understand that not everybody out there is African American. However, Hartford does have a large African American population, a large black population, and then if you look at the numbers, black folk didn't come out, no one came out to vote, but black folks didn't come out to vote. And one would think that if you vote your interest, not that I'm all that in a bag of chips, but I think we brought a pretty significant plan. You can look at it and see it. People did not vote for the black candidate. So what does that say? Does it say that they've moved beyond that, or is it just machine politics? What?
that's what it is. That's what I'm thinking. I think it's machine. I think that the old machine that has existed in this city and is here today is so divided that whenever you get a black candidate, particularly if you have more than one black candidate, there's going to be the old machine, whoever they want to support, is going to get behind that person and put all their weight in, like they did in this election. Talking about Sean, who was running, and then opted out, for the council. Didn't come to us and say, well, man, we brothers, let me support you, help you do your thing. No. So I think that whole old political black machinery that's done everything over a number of years the same way, election after election after election after election, and that divisiveness among them is a key factor. Because I think most people that see it and recognize it, they fed up. It's just like, man, it's the same old, excuse my language, shit as before.
I would say one thing before we continue on. We have to be careful in terms of our explanation of what we're talking about. and not to confuse and mix things up.
Mm-hmm.
What I mean by that is this. For example, Jim used the example of taking money out of, politics. There's never been any attempt to take money out of politics. Never. What they were saying is that it should be public money. That's a very different thing.
That way they don't have to raise the money.
Right. Individual candidates are not spending all their time doing that. If you confuse the issues here, you don't know what to attack.
Mm-hmm.
See, money is a factor. And there's no way, it's not debatable. Nobody has ever tried to take that out of politics. The only thing they said is that, well, okay, we know all this stuff has to be done, but if the individual candidate has to raise it, then it's a problem because some private factors are either supporting so-and-so, so the other legitimate person doesn't have a chance. So money is a factor, and we have to start with facing certain kinds of facts as basics first. That's a fact. You gotta have money.
Okay, right. Well then, and the political reality is that without money in the game of politics, you cannot play.
Well, and you're almost correct in terms of saying that. My point in terms of dealing with that, and the reason I explained it the way I did, is there is a minimum. See, and you got to deal with that, and that minimum covers certain kinds of things. We know that there are certain candidates who raise all kind of money, and whether they're effective as candidates or whether they deliver, that's a different issue. But there are some ground rules, so to speak, based on, I don't know, millennia, in terms of certain things you got to do. Now, if you don't understand that, what happens is someone tries to pick up the cost either on themselves individually, and try to absorb it that way. And of course, I've been in processes like that. But you gotta be clear, particularly at this level, in terms of what we're talking about, right, what we're up against, whatever.
Right.
I think the comment that George made in terms of machine is an important question, because people tend to do things by habit. Even the forums that I did attend, I heard people say, well, I'm going to just pull the Democratic,
vote the Democratic,
I'm going to pull the Democratic. That's what they know how to do. Right. So I say that not so much to say that you can't get around it, but you got to know clearly, that's what's going on, and okay, so this is what's going on. What is our strategy in light of knowing that the habits of people are a certain way, and we got to somehow move them off of that dime?
I had a conversation with someone today who argued with me that Pedro Segarra was not on the Republican line. I said, then you must not have gone out to vote. They said, I voted. Your name was on the 5th line, E5, and Segarra was not on the Republican line. He was on the Democrat line. I saw his name on the Democrat line. Now, they didn't even see his name on the Republican line. So conditioned to just circle, the fact that he was on the Republican line meant nothing.
They didn't even scan the ballot.
Nothing. They went in and looked, if they looked, right on the...
Straight across.
Was no confusion in their mind because they wasn't trying to be confused. They went in there and just, where's the Democrat bubble A? And then they just went along the top. So, it would seem certain political realities mean that if you want to win, particularly in the city of Hartford, then that race and that fight really has to start with the town committee.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. The town committee, and we went to that circus. The town committee was a circus. It was a
convention.
The convention. It was a circus. It was nothing but old, traditional, tired folks sitting up in there doing the same old tired stuff they've been doing year after year, making backroom deals, whispering in each other's ears, walking back and forth, cutting deals, getting what they're doing. This time they didn't even include a woman.
Yeah, but that is what Earl's saying when he said there are certain realities to the political.
Right.
Now you can be a visionary and you can be leading edge and you can break the mold, but if you want to play the game, there's a certain rules.
Well, you know,
And it is what it is.
my sense is this: the way you defeat something is to first recognize what it is. So you gotta say, well, this is what we up against, because that's what you plan your strategy on. Once you say, well, no, it ain't that way, then you don't plan your strategy that way. So it's clarity of thought in what you're trying to do. Okay, this is what we're up against. Now, everybody understand, this is what now how do we counter that?
Right. And
you build your strategy based on that recognition. Once you start playing with it, that reality, then you say, that's not important that we deal with our strategy that way. So I'm talking about strategic ways to deal with what we have. In addition to the problems that we're talking about here in terms of politics or the political system, I have maintained, and have written about it for years, that we have a sort of inbred incompetency in our systems. And we have people who feel that they are leaders who are essentially incompetent. And they just don't know. And, you know, if I tried to be an outside observer, I would say, well, okay, the whole system is like that. And therefore they don't feel that, you know, there's anything unique about them. I mean, I had a young man who was one of the candidates, you know, come up to me and suggest that they were operating in such a way as a new candidate that was going to bring change, you know, to Hartford. And the person was a little bit upset, you know, about it. My response to him is that this machine is what got us to where we are.
Right.
So are you telling me that you going into this machine,
Right. And you gonna bring
in order you going to bring something different to our community? And of course, I tend to be very focused and pointed in terms of our community. And I say that for a lot of reasons. It's not just because I'm an African American or whatever. But I believe that the kinds of problems that we see in black communities, whether it's in Hartford, or whether it's in LA, or Boston, Philadelphia, are systemic, meaning that we as a people go back to the founding of this country. And therefore, there are some recognitions that we need to recognize. I don't care whether the candidate is a Hispanic candidate or I'm not sure what white means, but a white candidate, you know, whatever, has to address. We have seen for decades politicians saying variations of the trickle-down theory. Oh, if we help everybody, then of course the black community is going to be out. You know, I certainly asked the Working Party that question when they first came into existence. I said, well, how is this going to help the black community? And I heard those trickle down again. You know, well, if we rise, no. We've heard that for 30, 40 years. There's no trickle down. These are different kinds of issues that we need to address, and they have not addressed them yet. Hence, we have people graduating from high school, can't read, write at the 5th or 6th grade level. We have many folk who graduated from college who can't write a simple page, and they accept that. And so if you address basic competency on the candidacy level, I think it's fair to say what George sort of mentioned earlier is that we are lost. See, we lost if the city cannot do better. That's been my position for a long time. We need to stop doing what we've been doing and do something different, and that's where you came in. That's what he's talking about. Doing something different, getting rid of this thing that we already know is stuck.
Right.
I think it's, it's really duplicitous on whatever black leadership we have, who have watched this thing chew up kids in such a way that, for me, it's frightening. To accept that it's normal for kids to kill kids, that's not normal.
No.
We should be up in arms.
Right.
And no one, whether they're from the suburbs or wherever, should be able to intimidate us into not addressing that. Because if kids are killing kids, they weren't killing kids when I grew up. If kids in the 12th grade can't read at the 6th grade level, that didn't happen when I grew up.
Right.
So if we don't see that as a crisis now, we are mentally retarded. How can you accept that as normal and then go on? I think that's the overriding problem that we have. We have people who are in there who accept that, well, kids gonna kill kids. Kids are not gonna know how to read or write or do basic math. It's acceptance. So the question is, well, if we can get it down to 20 kids killing kids or whatever, then, we're okay. That's what our leadership is doing.
Right.
This is what I mean by built-in incompetency. We have folk who have accepted a new standard, and that new standard is killing us. It's under the floor, and I have not heard anyone address that other than you, and I can't say that's going to be a success story, but you were addressing it, and that needs to be front and center. That, for whatever reason, the lack of productiveness on the part of our community has to be shameful to us. It certainly is to me. When I grew up in a community here in Hartford where blacks knew how to do and perform just about any kind of thing necessary for the operation of that community.
Right.
We don't know how to do that anymore. And it's such a distortion that incoming groups, be they immigrants from the islands or from Puerto Rico or whatever, tend to think that's just the way they are. So this is an issue in terms of us as people, certainly anyone who pretends to represent us, and it's a problem with our churches. Because if they are not willing to stand up and say, well, wait a minute, kids killing kids is an abomination. It's not something that, well, let's work on it tonight or let's go out. That's not what I'm talking about. We need to stop it. And that means us getting together saying, no, wait a minute, we're not going down this route.
Right.
We have done that in so many areas that if you look at us in 2011, there is no recognition of this community by anything that I was raised in. The values are not there. Certainly not the intellectual acumen that I was familiar with growing up here in Hartford. So for me, this whole political thing, probably like many people out there who are to some extent aware, is a sham. See, if we're not going to address those kinds of things, I think it's almost a joke to start talking about blacks going into physics or blacks going into, high science or mathematics when we out here firing on one another on the street and people are pretending. I say pretending that they don't know what's going on.
We've lost our moral compass.
That's cruel. See, and you lose that, you're in trouble.
You have to address the moral compass before you can get to the political compass, because the politics follow the moral. I saw on TV the other day a young kid, 20 years old, knock an old man down, 70 years old. And they don't care anything about it. The problem of this North End, and you trying to bring a change and bend us another way, is a moral compass, and sin is big money.
Oh, yeah.
Drugs, lack of respect for parents, all this go to the court system and keep the jails full. It's money. It's about money. these people in this country, any way to have money flowing, they will maintain the system for money to flow. So they're not going to come out and vote for you because the machine won't let them. The machine do not want you in office because you're going to address these issues.
So, I mean, just the prison industrial complex, and you've got the whole underground economy. Someone is getting rich off of the illegal sale of narcotics. It's infected the police department and the whole 9 yards.
That was part of your whole message, man.
It's a moral problem.
A moral problem. People pimp poverty. And poor people.
It's big.
It's big money.
Big business.
The drugs, the prison industry. It's money. So when you come out and tell people the truth, like Brother Mac saying, and you address the moral issue, the people that's making the money off it, has been a part of it, our black folks in this community gonna jump up and do everything they can to stop it.
Well, there's another aspect of what we're talking about now in terms of, the people who live off of the ills, if you will, of the black community through the prison system, often the educational system, and many other systems. But there is an accepted system. Many of the 501c3s in this region employ people, often at high levels, meaning their pay, to service our ills. So you have various kinds of nonprofit organizations who theoretically have a mission to correct some part of our community. Well, why would they do that if they're getting $200,000 a year or $250,000 or whatever
Exactly.
with benefits and all of that? So we got some stuff to deal with as a community, first of all, because we are the victims of that. We are employing tons of people throughout this region. Not too long ago, I tried to get a list of the 501c3s that were in the metropolitan area that serve the black or brown community. So you're talking about thousands of people, multiple thousands, who have jobs correcting something that's alleged or attached to our community.
And I think correcting is out of play. It's more creative management.
Poverty
manipulate. You know what I mean? To maintain it.
To maintain it.
Poverty maintenance. Yeah. Well, that follows right down the track of U.S. foreign policy when it comes to warfare. The wars aren't waged to win. Wars are waged to make money off of, and so you contain. So if you have a war on poverty, it's a containment policy, and how can we maximize profits as we engage in that warfare? So the war on poverty, war on drugs, maximum profits can be made for all around. We just need to have that conflict continue. And so when you start talking about eliminating that conflict, because Hartford is small enough that you actually could eliminate these things if there was the political will and the moral foundation and a willingness to do it, and the dollars.
And the knowledge.
Oh, the knowledge. And the knowledge.
You need to understand it.
Right. It's not that big a problem. Hartford, I mean, we're not talking South Central or Watts. I mean, Hartford is not that big, but it's profiting someone because they go to great extents to make sure that it continues.
This Hartford situation is very tricky. I can at least go back 20, maybe 30 years where consultants from all around the world have come into this city at one time and said, well, you have a little small problem. You got a small city. How come we can't fix this? And you can go to any of the newspapers and track when I'm talking about vast amounts of money was invested to theoretically correct this problem. At some point, that thing probably need to be vetted. And I think what we have is a lot of interconnections into Hartford that feed the suburbs. So it's probably inaccurate, to say that Hartford is a small city in the way that we're discussing it now. We know technically it is, but we know the people who are employed here, are not living here, they're not resident here. We also know that many of the so-called satellite 501c3s organizations, Kroger's a perfect example. Kroger's located in Hartford. It keeps trend data, demographic data on the region. Well, is that a Hartford organization? The people that come from Hartford,
Right.
Are they looking at trends that might affect us and working on those things? No. So we need to kind of like do some thinking about what we want to do. Mm-hmm. And the reality again is that with the kind of competency we have, people aren't even addressing the right questions.
Right.
See,
that's very true.
And one of the reasons I try to, in our conversations, well, no, wait a minute, let's not mix those things up. Because once you mix them up, one get buried. And then you address the other part, which might or might not be true, but the one that's critical to know and to focus on never really gets touched on.
Right. And I agree, and I think you're not going to see it in this administration, my opinion. You're not going to see that happen. And I think that addresses the whole, what we were talking about earlier, the apathy among people. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because there's no effort other than the effort that you were presenting to educate people, to make people aware of the immorality that's existing. This whole turnout of 5,000 people in a 45,000 registered city. That's not going to be addressed. You know what I mean? So, will it get better? I don't think so.
Well, most certainly it won't be addressed if the current administration considers 53,000 votes.
5,300.
5,300 votes thereabouts, plus or minus a landslide. I mean, it's not a landslide by any stretch of imagination. It's pitiful.
It is pitiful.
But you have this built-in incompetence that sees any win as a mandate, as opposed to declining interest that needs to be addressed so that we can become significant.
Right.
How does the governor go to Washington, D.C. and lobby for Hartford when 5,000 people voted for your mayor?
More people came out in Weathersfield and the surrounding little small towns and voted than people came out in Hartford voted.
Yeah, I think it, again speaks to the entrenched nature of what has existed over the past decade plus. Unless we can push for a higher level of competency, I think we're going to be doomed, to fail repeatedly. It's not that these things are unknown. There were administrations, that said, we don't seem to be able to attract anybody, they would be nice. They seem to attract anybody with skills and experience at management and administration. What they really wanted to say, well, we got some dumb people here.
Right.
And they don't know what they're doing. They're just muddling along the same way they muddle along in the school system and pretend that, they're doing okay. And so you ask, well, how are the kids doing? They say, well, they're doing better than they was before. Wait a minute.
That was bad.
They 6 years.
That was terrible.
They 6 years behind.
Right.
But you say they're doing better. So now, what is it? They 5.5 years behind?
Right, exactly.
But that's the language here in Hartford.
Right. And that's what's acceptable.
Well, it's the language, and those who want to be leaders or purport to be leaders have to be at least able to separate these issues and address them directly.
But how can you do that when the ones that are in charge now are part of the problem? You can't change morals through ignorance. If you dumb down the kids in school, they can't read when they get out of high school. An example for you, a kid 9 years old, he stayed back in the first grade. He can stand on the corner of Enfield Street and Magnolia and sell drugs, and he's got a gold chain on, cost $3,000. And the cops ride by, he don't see it.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's
Because it's ignorance and sin.
Yeah.
It's a combination. This man wants to address those issues. They don't want him to address those issues. And the reason why they don't want him to address those issues, because he's going to take their money from them.
Of course.
Period.
Of course. Certainly, I think that's the overall,
When you
picture.
say,
But see, as a candidate or as a leader, your job is to analyze that and do strategic attacks in order to overcome it. That's the job of the leadership. It doesn't help. I mean, we know clearly about the overall process in Hartford. We know what it's been doing. Any of us who've been here, in fact, it's such a stink in Hartford that it's known all across the country in terms of its dysfunctionalism in a number of ways. But leadership has an awesome task. They always had. The leaders have to see it. So, okay, so this is what they're doing. Okay, this is going to be our attack. There's always a way to overcome.
But very difficult.
It's difficult. No,
when
it's
he
difficult.
is poor and the criminals got all the money.
Yeah. That's the
issue.
Right.
No.
Which
The
goes
issue
back-
is the bondsman, the social worker, the lawyer, the judge, the system he's fighting. They got all kinds of money. They can move it around.
Right.
He has no money.
Which brings us back to the money point that you was addressing earlier. When you have no money, and now most politicians on the national level and a lot on the local level have money. Most of them have money when they come in.
Yeah.
They got cash. When you poor, you don't have no money, and then you tell them the truth, and you addressing moral issues.
They don't like you.
They don't like you.
But you bring up an interesting point, and it's something that we wanted to, something we were saying during our campaign is that, being the people's politician, most politicians have money when they get here, but their money isn't their money. They have access to money because people behind them put that money up, and behind them, those are the controllers of the politician. So when they get into a position where they could either make policy or execute policy, or they're in the judicial branch because they've been uploaded from this here system of corruption, it's a stacked deck. But with the right strategy, the right analysis of the issues,
Exactly. Right.
I think that it can be done.
Yeah. No, I believe
I
you
agree.
stand. See that it can be done.
But he got to continue, not stop.
Well, that's a different issue too, but I think it can be done, first of all. Money buys resources, human resources, people with skills. Whether you have the greenback or you have a person out there who's very skillful and knowledgeable, who says, Stan, I can give you X number of hours a week, that's $100,000. See, because you're trying to buy people who understand certain things, who know certain things, who can execute certain things for you. If you get those people committed, then you diminish the actual green piece you need. That's why it's so critical to know that. Once you say, okay, we gotta have this, you say, why? You need a person like this. You need a person like this. Okay, so I know I need those people. Where are they? And how can I get those people working on my campaign? That detracts from how you was going to use that money to either buy someone to do a follow-up survey or whatever. So it's money. Money is tricky. It's not only paper, but it's people. It's what you know how to do. And the sad thing about Hartford is that we just don't have, very skillful people, and so it's run at a very low level, and the expectations are very low. And it's so bad that when you confront people about it, they will say, well, why are you picking on us? I've had a white suburbanite say to me because I was asking a pointed question about the lack of productiveness, and this person said, see, this is why we don't like working in Hartford. You are on my back just because I can't perform, and I'm getting paid $200,000 a year or whatever. That mindset is also in the heads of black folk. And I said, no. You're supposed to be angry if your kids are being shot.
Right.
If your kids can't read, why aren't you angry?
They accepted it.
They accept it, and this is where I continue to try to keep our focus, and that is this incompetent, this lack of consciousness, to the extent that a large part of the population operates in this way. So there's a certain general acceptance that, well, we don't expect them to be able to perform anyways. So we don't perform, and you say, okay, that's the way they are.
Right.
Well, I think we're into a different kind of realm here now because, to me, we're dealing with a certain mindset, and we didn't go into this campaign really to deal with the psychological ills of the city. And I think there are a lot of psychological ills in this city. Brother Matt mentioned morals. Yeah, that's part of it too. But psychologically, I think people have just so many misconceptions about what is right, what is good, how educated I am or not educated I am. These are all issues that face Hartford. And I mean, it varies all over the place because I can go down on the corner of Enfield Street and have a very intelligent conversation with a brother on the corner. Probably more intelligent than I can with one of the guys that call themselves a leader in this city. I've seen it, I've experienced it many, many times. I can go down on this corner and talk to, we use the word Six-Pack Joe sometimes. But Six-Pack Joe is not the problem here. Six-Pack Joe is the results of this problem. The problem is the leadership. I will never ever change that opinion. The problem of Hartford is the leadership or the lack of leadership we've had over the years. Now, if you want to look at statistics and stuff like that, maybe at some point we can get it to you, but we know already that a lot of black people's ideas in this city and in North Hartford, a lot of black, good, community-loving people, a lot of their dreams have been squashed by politicians who don't know as much as Six-Pack Joe.
City workers and so on.
Yeah,
I think what you said, Jim, is probably important just to note here in this sense. When I talk about incompetency and what you know, I'm not necessarily talking about schooling. And, I get very kind of touchy about talking about that because I know we need to be in school learning. But the significant fact is that you learn every day, or you should be. And the person that Jim is referring to as Six-Pack Joe, I use the term all the time, is a person who keeps reading, very knowledgeable, very learned, much more capable than many of our political leaders, and we got a lot of people out there like that. During my time, the way we responded to that was charter oak college. I was part of the founding of Charter College. And the recognition was that there were many people out there who had acquired the skills and the knowledge, and we needed a different way to degree them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because they knew more than the person with the degree. So the question was, okay, if this person knows this, how do we certify that he knows this?
Mm-hmm.
And Charter College still does that. I mean, they've added a whole lot of, I think, stuff to it, but that was the idea. We fought for that. We said, no, this guy out here is much more competent than this person, and it can be demonstrated. I'm not talking about competency that's in your mind. I'm talking about things that you can demonstrate. And we have a lot of people in leadership roles who simply are not functional. They're kind of like our high school kids. They're in there, they have a degree, whether it's an undergrad or a master's, but they're dysfunctional. You know, and then of course they don't want to be tested for that reason. You know, you test them, you find out that they don't know.
And that is a huge problem. We're out of time.
Okay, but let's address. I want to address that thing you just got through talking
Charter
about.
College.
Same thing. You can turn the machine off. We'll
All
just
right.
do this without the machine.
We're gonna have the after show that you all are gonna miss. But thanks for joining us. You at least got about an hour or so of our post-election conversation and the stuff that goes on behind the scenes here at our camp. At any rate, I don't think anyone else is going to be this transparent. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk again real soon. Great things are still on the horizon and still coming. We're not giving up the fight. We've just begun. See you real soon. Bye bye.